Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is admire. Let's take a moment and look at some of the ways we use this verb. The first way we use the verb admire is to mean to regard someone or something with respect or warm approval. A second way the verb admire gets used is to mean to look at someone or something with pleasure. So this verb has a really positive meaning. With regard to the first definition, looking at someone with respect, a phrasal verb you might encounter that has kind of a similar meaning, to look up to. Many times when we admire someone, we think they're a good person, we think they're doing good work, and it might even continue with the idea that you want to be like that particular individual. You should know that the verb admire is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, we need to drop the E on the end, and that's because our verb ends with a vowel consonant E pattern. When we drop the E and add ing, that forms admiring. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, admire, ends in a voiced sound, an R sound. This means when we add the past tense ending, we just want to make a D sound. We don't want to add an extra syllable. So the past tense and the participle forms of this verb should sound like this: admired, admired. Okay. Now, I've got one phrasal verb for us to look at today, and that is to admire for. Generally, this means we are forming some type of positive opinion of someone for having a particular quality or attribute. Let's take a look at this in an example sentence. I admire my students for their dedication to learning while balancing many responsibilities. When I thought of this verb, admire, my mind immediately went to the students I have in my current classes. Many of them are working, they're taking care of family, and they're still making time to come to class and do additional practice outside. So, needless to say, I have a very positive opinion of their dedication, the way they approach learning with so many other things going on in their lives. Now, let's move on and talk about our verb of the day, and we'll practice it in a few different verb tenses. Today, we'll work on the simple past tense and the simple future. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known time. Many times in past tense sentences, you see time signals. Could be a word like yesterday. It could be a specific date in the past. Could be something like 2 months ago, right? All of those are signaling to us this is a completed action. Now, not every sentence in the simple past tense is going to have a time signal. The idea that this is a completed action can be implied as part of a conversation, right? If we're having a conversation about yesterday, we don't have to keep saying yesterday, yesterday, yesterday in all of our sentences. It's understood. The same thing can happen in longer texts as you're reading a story, right? If the writer has explained that this occurred at a certain point in the past, they're not going to continue repeating that. Now, the nice thing about making simple past tense sentences is that our pattern stays the same no matter what our subject is. Okay? So, in the affirmative, we start with our subject, and then we use that ed form of the verb. You can see that in my example sentence. We admired the students' works of art at the end of the year celebration. So, In this sentence, maybe we're talking about going to an event where there are paintings, there are sculptures, there are other creative things that people have made. They're works of art, right? And we looked at it and thought, wow, that's impressive, or, oh, this particular thing gives me pleasure. Now let's move on and talk about making sentences in the negative. To do this, our pattern, again, doesn't matter what the subject is, but it is a little different. So we're going to have our subject, we're going to use did not, and then the base verb. Okay, so here, we're not using the ed form of the verb in the negative. You might hear the contraction or see the contraction used in the simple past tense. So did not can be shortened to didn't. I've used that in my example sentence here. They didn't admire their former supervisor's rude demeanor. Okay, so demeanor, kind of the way someone looks and acts. Here, maybe this is a group of employees, right? Like, we didn't respect the way maybe this person was very short in answering questions, wasn't friendly, right? All of those could be perceived as being rude. Finally, let's talk about making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, I start with did, I have my subject, and then my base verb. Again, notice I'm not using the ed form of the verb. I'm only using that in the affirmative. Here's one more example. Did you admire anyone when you were a child? Okay, so we're thinking back into the past, right? As a child, right? Is there a particular person you had great respect for, you looked at with warm approval? Okay. If so, I would love for you to make a sentence. You can type a comment here into the video. Think about how you might form that sentence. I'm always intrigued with people's answers to that question. But now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future. There are several ways to talk about the future in English, but today we're going to practice sentences with will. Will is used sometimes as people discuss their plans, but it becomes a little more common as people make promises or predictions, things they think will happen in the future. They might also use it to make an offer. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple future with will is that our structure is going to stay the same no matter what the subject is. So in the affirmative, we start with a subject, we use will, and then we use the base verb. Here's an example sentence. We will admire our surroundings while we visit the mountains. Okay? So here, someone's maybe talking about some future plans to see, maybe it's new to them, the mountains, right? But they're saying we're going to take some time, just look around and maybe look with great awe at how beautiful the natural landscape is around them. Now, let's move on and talk about negative sentences in the simple future. To do this, we start with our subject, we use will not, and then the base verb. The contraction for will not looks different to many people. It's W-O-N apostrophe T. We pronounce it won't with a long O. So you'll hear that quite often as people speak. I've used it here in my example sentence. Your colleagues won't admire you with that attitude. Right? So maybe I'm speaking to a friend who kind of has a bad attitude, right? I'm making a prediction. Maybe this person is starting a new job. And I'm going to say they're not going to have respect for you if you act or behave in this particular way. Finally, let's look at making a question, a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, I start with will, I have my subject, and then the base verb. Here's my last example. Will fans admire the athlete's approach to the game? So sometimes as new players join teams, there might be a great deal of respect and warm approval, maybe even sometimes some excitement, but sometimes someone might have a very different way of doing things or a different way of speaking, and it might cause one to kind of ask or think about, right? How are people going to react to this? So that's what that question is asking. Will fans admire? Okay. So they might be asking for a prediction here, which is why we're using the simple future. Now, let's move on and talk about some other words that are related to our verb admire. The first word we're going to discuss today is the noun admiration. This noun can have a couple different meanings. One way we use it is to talk about respect or warm approval. This could be respect of someone or something. An example of this might be, the students have genuine admiration for their teacher. Right? Saying the students respect and approve the teacher. A second way to use the noun admiration is to talk about something that is regarded as impressive and worthy of respect. An example of this. Her flower garden is the admiration of everyone in town. So imagine with me, right, a beautiful collection of flowers, right? And as people see that, they go, oh, wow, this person has an incredible garden, right? So that is what that sentence is describing. Another related word you might encounter is admirer. This can also have a couple different meanings. The first is to describe a person who has a particular high regard for someone or something. An example of this. They've been admirers of the musician for many years, right? So they respect. They might be very impressed with a particular musician and that person's work. But a second way the noun admirer gets used is to describe someone who has a romantic interest in another individual. An example of this might be, do you have a secret admirer? Sometimes people will use this together, secret, meaning I don't know who it is. Maybe someone is leaving notes or gifts, right? So it's a bit of a mystery. One more related word for us today, it's the adjective admirable. This means that something is causing or deserving of respect and or approval. An example of this in a sentence might be, he has many admirable qualities. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.